Thank you for returning to Hobby Shop 1983, today on page 121. Sometimes you walk in the hobby shop looking for that brand new offering from a company that you really like, and there's nothing new. And you see that item that's been haunting you a little bit. It's been sitting on the shelf, and you've picked it up and looked at it half a dozen times, but you never pulled the trigger on buying it. That's what these guys were to me. The Spacefarer's Guide to Alien Monsters, Spacefarer's Guide to Alien Races, and Spacefarer's Guide to Planets, Rourke's Diadem. This is volume 2. I did not get volume 1. The first 2 I bought off the shelf. The Monsters and the Alien Races. This one I acquired from a buddy of mine when he dropped out of gaming. Today we're going to take a look at these gems. These are nifty little things that sat on the shelf for a long time at my hobby stores. I remember seeing these on the shelves as far in as the mid-80s at various hobby stores in the area. And I pulled the trigger on them on or around 1983. And I've always liked these guys. And remember, the rules of Hobby Shop 1983 is it had to be on the shelf for sale before December 31st of 83. These came out in the late 70s. So we're going to take a look at these and how they would have applied to your space game and why they were worth getting. And they are still available. They're in secondary markets. They're rather expensive now. And as I said, I don't have the Planet Guide 1. The cheapest I've found it so far in browsing is $40. But I will take a look at these. They're not available in Drive-Thru RPG, I checked. So if you can find these at any other source, go nuts. But we're going to take a look at why these are good to add to your collection and why they finally leapt off the shelf and into my arms in the hobby shop, in Hobby Shop 1983 on page 121. So the Spacefarer's Guide to Alien Monsters. We'll start with this book. These 3 books were published in 1979 by Phoenix Games. 1978 saw book 1 of Spacefarer's Guide to Planets. And the idea behind these is, as it says on this one, Rourke's Diadem is usable with SF role-playing games such as Traveler, Space Patrol, Space Quest, etc. We also used it for Space Opera and Star Frontiers. There were a lot of interesting ideas in here, but they're not fully fleshed out. They're not designed as a supplement to any one game. They're ideas. You would go into this, you'd get some into ideas, and you would go ahead and flesh it out a little bit. I even use this guide quite a bit for my Gamma World creatures. Any kind of source book back in the early to mid 80s that gave you ideas for different monsters and things for science fiction were hard to come by. And I was excited to get these guys. As I said, these haunted me for a long time on the shelf. It was just one of those that I never really pulled the trigger on. And then when I finally did, I was very happy once I got them home and started reading them. So we're going to take a look. This is written by Ed Lipsett. I haven't been able to find any real information on Mr. Lipsett. Cover illustrated by Bob Charette, and he did a lot of the designs in here. Bob Charette went on to work for the folks for FASA for Battletech, and wrote a novel or 2 for them and did quite a bit of work for them. Also sculpted some of the original battle mechs. As you can see, it's copyright 1979, Phoenix Games, all rights reserved. Unfortunately, Phoenix Games went out of business in 1981. So before I'd even bought these, the company was out of business. But as I said, these were on the shelves in hobby stores around my area right through the mid-80s. Maybe that's why the company went out of business, unfortunately, but I enjoyed this book. I was happy to get it. You have a ton of creatures. Some are drawn from fiction that was available prior to 1979. Others are original to the book itself. And what you would do is you would go ahead and take a look at each of these things, and then you would look at what they do and what they don't do, and what kind of creatures they are. And then there's a nice encounter chart for you, another encounter chart, and then we go. Then we take a look. Now, if you look at these, and if you're familiar with Gamma World from first edition in 1981 and 1980, I think, and second edition Gamma World from 1983, they're not that different in layout than this. There's not a lot of information in those listings, which is why these work so well for Gamma World. So you would just go in here and you would see Ambrose's Beast. Physical shape is that of a smallest cat with a long tongue, which it uses to suck the blood of its prey. When hunting or in danger, it uses specialized telepathic broadcast to render itself invisible. By a similar mechanism, prey are prevented from feeling the touch of its tongue. So it's basically a big old cat-like mosquito. And it goes ahead and it sticks its tongue in. You can't feel it. It sucks out blood. It doesn't say here what purpose it needs the blood for. It is 1 meter in size, so it's not small. And you do have hits here, 5 and 2, and the hits are explained up here. This was just kind of a sop to make this book kind of something you could use. We never used the hit references. We would take the ideas and then we would go ahead and expand on them in our game. The Backbiter, very popular because Curly Howard calls people backbiters periodically in the various Three Stooges shorts, which were incredibly popular with our group in the late 70s, early 80s. They were comedy classics on late night TV, as the Curly Shuffle told us. Also in the afternoons here in Chicagoland. So you're getting the idea. This is all it was just little glimpses of these creatures with a little paragraph or two about what they did, and then you would go from there. Now, this is in the earliest days of D&D. AD&D was just getting its feet under it, having started in 77 with the Monster Manual and going 78 and 79 with the Player's Handbook and DMG, respectively. So you were just getting a fleshed out form of D&D, and a lot of this was similar to what was being offered for D&D. A lot of this reminded me of basic D&D, which we started with the original box set and then quickly moved to basic, what's now the Holmes edition. And these entries are not different from that. And of course, that's very similar to Gamma World at the time. Here we have a reference to Dire Wolf. As I said, some of this comes from science fiction or fantasy that had already been out. Let's face it, those of us who were reading science fiction and fantasy in the late 70s, it was pretty sparse. There was, especially fantasy, there wasn't much out there after Tolkien. Science fiction fared a little bit better. It saw a bit of a surge in the 70s, but science fiction has definitely gotten better over the years. Fantasy has too. So this is really what you're looking at. This is all the books show. I'm not going to go through every page of every book, but there you go. And really, you sat there with this book and you got ideas. Let's take a look at the back of the book here. Also available from Phoenix Games. The Dungeon Master Aids. Book of Shamans, Book of Treasures. Science Fiction Role-Playing Aids, which are the 4 I'm looking at. Role-Playing Scenarios, The Lost Abbey of Calthanway. Boxed Games, Streets of Stalingrad, Elementary Watson. And coming soon, Role-Playing Scenarios, The Fane of Kelyishendra, The Mines of Kagridav, and The Courts of the Uncrowned Kings. Boxed games are Dragon Ship, Mutiny in Space, and Westmark 1. Unfortunately, I don't think a lot of the coming soon saw print because I believe Streets of Stalingrad was their last game, and they went out of business in 81. So there you go. That's the first one. The alien races, very similar. These are alien races that you could adapt, and we did in fact adapt to science fiction games. And written by the same gentleman, Ed Lipset and Bob Sherratt. And then you would have all kinds of racial parameters for the strength, the dex and such, but going up to 600 strength, etc. So this was really not that useful if you were playing Traveler, for instance, or even Gamma World, because that's not the same basis for the game. So I tended to blow past a lot of this stuff and get into itself. So Traveler conversion chart, Space Patrol conversion chart, Space Quest conversion chart. I'm really surprised that Space Opera is not represented here. Space Opera was also kind of a big name at the time in role-playing, Traveler, of course, being the big dog. And then we get the different alien races, and it's the exact same thing. Here is one of my earliest looks at an uplifted dolphin. It's not really an uplift, but it is. So there you have it. Just a couple of paragraphs giving you the race. We would take it and we would break it out. We use some of these for champions as well. We created our own universe and champions. So my buddy and I, who both like these books, would go in and take a look and come up with ideas for champions out of this. This also was published in 1979. The Flume's image does not register on scanners. That's kind of cool. So very D&D flavor to these, but most everything was at the time. They were the big dog. They were the ones that were setting the trends. And then we have acknowledgments for all the places these came from, which is all kinds of different science fiction writers, in which book it came out of. I've read some H.B. and Piper. Little Fuzzy, I don't remember if I knew that one. Andre Norton I'd read quite a bit of. Lynn Carter I read a little bit. L. Sprague de Camp, I read the Conan. Not seeing Larry Niven. Larry Niven was a pretty good influence on Traveler and on me. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the last book I have in this set. And this is the Spacefarer's Guide to Planets, Sector 2, Rourke's Diadem. Always bothered me there was no apostrophe there for possession of Rourke. Rourke's Diadem. I used this book quite a bit in my earliest days of Traveler, and in fact named my most successful Traveler character, Rourke Walton. His first name, Rourke, came from Rourke's Diadem. Oops, age is showing on these. This is the one that I got from my buddy who was dropping out of playing role-playing games at the time. And he liked to underline and highlight stuff. I have a few of his legacy items in my collection, and they are all underlined and highlighted. It was just something he did. So here we got to look at Rourke's Diadem, which is just a space sector, basically. And then we get various ideas of different planets or different power groups that are in there. There's even a mention of Traveler's Aid Society in here. There's an actual planetary write-up that my buddy did. He ran us on the game of Traveler years ago. I've held on to this. There's the reference to the Traveler's Aid Society right there. Thieves Guild, Assassins Guild. I mean, very similar to what was around in D&D at the time. And as I said, D&D was kind of the big dog. The Navigators Guild, the Pilots Guild, Stewards Guild, all these different little power groups. D&D was still the pace setter, so a lot of stuff that was out was similar to it. And then we get a bunch of trading companies and the Empire's Space Encounters, Brotherhood of Tarl Space Encounters. These were just nice. They're ideas. I never used their planetary universal world profile. I would just read up on the ideas of the planets. There's a ton in here. Again, I'm not going to go through each and every one, but you get the idea. These were nice for ideas. These are not complete books. These are not going to write your story for you, but they're certainly going to inspire you for some things. And there are 100 planets presented in here, which is pretty neat. And this, again, was 1979. Pretty innovative, pretty far-reaching for 1979 in gaming. Again, I wasn't even in gaming yet. I wouldn't join until April of 80. But these guys were on the shelves throughout my early gaming life. And I put off buying them for the longest darn time. And finally, one day, I just said, you know what? The heck with it. I'm going to buy the darn things. And I'm going to see what they're all about. Because they were wrapped in cellophane. I couldn't even page through it. And when I bought my first two, which was the Alien Races and Alien Monsters, my buddy pulled this out of his Traveler stuff. I had not seen it somehow. And he had Rourke's Diadem already. And he said, oh yeah, that's a great book. So we used to swap these back and forth. Like I said, when my buddy dropped out of gaming, I acquired that. These cost the princely sum of $8. And since I bought these in the early 80s, that's not cheap. I don't know what he paid for that, but I'm guessing it's $8. Partial sticker still there. So $8 whole in 1979 when they were published to the early 80s, considering we were making about $3 an hour, those were not cheap. So that's all I've got today on Hobby Shop 1983. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane back to the hobby shop. I did. Please like and subscribe if you like what you heard and saw. Also take a look. We're doing the Jump Point 2. I'll attach the video below for the link to Jump Point 2 and all the information for that. And I'll be promoting Jump Point 2 more and more right after Hobby Shop 83. That's all I've got to say today on page 121. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.